everyone, today I'm going to be reviewing Salt to the Sea by Ruta Sepetys. This book was sent to me for free by Penguin Teen. They also invited me to do an honest review that actually enters me into a giveaway. So thank you so much Penguin Teen for the opportunity and for sending this book to me. Salt to the Sea was released on February 2nd of this year, and it's a book set in World War II. So it is historical fiction, but it does surround actual events that happened in the war. It's set in 1945, and we follow 4 different perspectives. Each person that we follow is actually a teenager that's caught up in this war. They all come from different backgrounds and different cultures. We have Joanna, and we have Florian, who's from East Prussia, who was working in Germany as an artist, but then some crazy circumstances led him to become an art thief whenever we start the book. And we have Amelia, who is a 15-year-old Polish girl that's actually hiding out in Germany. And our last perspective is Alfred, who is a German soldier working under Hitler. Fate brings all 4 of these people together, and it makes for such an emotional story. I will start off by saying I loved this book. I truly fell in love with it. I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. It blew me away. It was beautiful. It was heartbreaking. It was eye-opening. It totally taught me so much about World War II that I didn't know. Gave me like new perspectives from the different cultural backgrounds of the characters, because they all saw what was going on through their own cultural lens, and so that just made for such a fascinating read. I've read a few other books set during this time period, but this one's just a little bit different. First being that you do get those different perspectives. It's not just focusing on one perspective, but also in the way that it's written. The writing is pretty simplistic, and whenever I think of history or historical writing, I think of long books that have very detailed and flowery writing. This book is not like that. It's, like I said, very simplistic, and each perspective that you read from only lasts about 2 or 3 pages, so you're constantly jumping back and forth between each person, and I loved that about it. It made the book go by so quickly. I was reading it so quickly. You really did not have a second to put it down. There was no point where I wanted to be like, okay, let me stop reading for the night. Like, I just wanted to keep reading. Each time a perspective ended off, it was a little bit of a cliffhanger or a little bit of a hint that something more was going on, so you wanted to keep reading and get back to that perspective. All of the perspectives just pulled me into the story and really just did not let go. The writing, even though it's like that, it's not lacking in any way. Ruta Sepetys for sure did her research. I read through the author's note at the end of the book, and it took her at least 3 years to research for this book. She traveled to 6 different countries to talk to people, hear testimonies, so that she can make this book as realistic and authentic as possible, and she definitely achieved that. She just has such a way with words that she can say so much in so little wording, and it's absolutely beautiful. She uses specific details that just paint a picture in your mind without her having to do paragraphs and paragraphs of descriptions, and I just think that's wonderful. I love that kind of writing, and I really admire the talent that it takes to do that. Like I said, this book taught me a lot about World War II. Of course, I learned about it a lot in school. They just focus on 1 or 2 aspects of the war. Mostly they focus on Hitler and the Holocaust and the effects of that, but this book really just shows the different sides of the war, and it's really actually focusing on Hitler versus Stalin, and it brings, Russia into the mix and how Russia is taking over Germany and people are evacuating Germany and what kind of chaos that caused. It was just such, like I said, an eye-opening book that showed me a new perspective I never really thought of. And so I learned a lot from this book. It does focus on one event that I don't want to get too much into because I don't want to spoil it. It focuses on the Wilhelm Gustloff, which I know I'm saying that wrong, which is a German ship that they were using to evacuate all of these German people to escape from the Russians. I had actually never heard of that ship, which is crazy because of the huge part that it ends up playing in World War II history. Apparently I'm not the only one who didn't know about it. Apparently a lot of people don't know about this ship, so I just thought that was fascinating aspect to the story. The characters are so great. Like, I just can't say enough good things about this book. The characters are so great. I truly connected to them. They all have secrets, and the reader's trying to figure out those secrets along with all of the characters around them are trying to figure out the secrets. Even though these characters are all so different, they're coming together in this terrible time, and it was just a beautiful thing to read about. I did have a few favorite characters, and there is a little bit of romance, which is done perfectly. Like, the romance offers you a little bit of light in this almost overwhelming darkness. There's also some wonderful secondary characters that you become just as attached to as you do to the main characters. This is not a happy story. This book does kind of rip your heart out, but in the best way possible, I guess, because you're so connected to it that you feel what's going on. I cried multiple times throughout this book. It was really just a roller coaster of emotions, but yeah, I just love the themes that are brought up in this book, and shows how in this war, you know, the different sides think that they're the right side, but there really is no right side or wrong side at this point. Everything is just bad. Everything is just wrong. Both sides are suffering terribly, and all of these tragedies are happening. These innocent people who had nothing to do with this war and don't want a part of it. It just gives such an important perspective to history, and I wouldn't consider myself a history buff per se. When you read in textbooks what's happened in history, it doesn't really come to life. It just comes down to facts and numbers. But when you read a book like this, you really get to feel the effect of events that happened in history. For me, it leaves a bigger impact on me than reading a textbook. I'll remember more about World War II from reading a book like this than reading the textbook. I just think that's a really important part of stories like these, and especially since this one is young adult, it's told through perspectives of teenagers, and I think that's a great point as well. But I would say if you like historical fiction, you should read this. Even if you don't like historical fiction, I would suggest picking this up. I thought because I always like to try to bring up something about the book that could have been done better, even if I loved it, and I could not think of something that this book could have done better. Every word had a reason behind it. It just made for such a powerful and impactful read. There was one character, Alfred. I didn't really love his parts, but they were so necessary to the story, and they were leading up to something else, so I don't think those should have been done differently. I don't think him as a character should have been done differently. Ruta Sepetys wanted you to feel that way. It was done purposefully, so that's the only thing I could think of that maybe I didn't like so much about the book. The thing I would say is that Ruta Sepetys did not hold back when it came to the disturbing scenes. Terrible things happened during this war. Unimaginable tragedies, unimaginable horror occurred, and so she doesn't really hold back in that aspect. So if maybe you're not super comfortable reading that kind of stuff, maybe that you're kind of sensitive towards that stuff, then I guess I wouldn't suggest this book for you, because there are some scenes that will stick with me probably for the rest of my life from this book. You know these things actually happened, and that's what just makes it so much harder to read and so much more disturbing. I mean, the book isn't full of those kinds of scenes, but there are a few that are pretty harsh. But the book does also have, you know, hope and lighthearted moments that kind of make up for that darkness. So yeah, those are my thoughts on Salt to the Sea. I truly fell in love with this book. I fell in love with the characters. It's now one of my favorite books. I think it's a very important book, and I would highly suggest it if you're even remotely interested in reading it. This is one that I will keep and reread in the future. It's one that will not leave my heart and mind for a long time. And I also wanted to mention Ruta Sepetys has another book called Between Shades of Grey, and I have not read it, but it's also set during World War II. But I heard that Salt to the Sea is actually a companion book to Between Shades of Grey. A character in this book is the cousin of the main character in Between Shades of Grey. So if you read Between Shades of Grey, I definitely think you should read this one. Alright, so let me know in the comments if you've read Salt to the Sea and what you thought of it. Thank you so much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed my review, and I will see you soon. Bye!
I find things that can take up